We all recognize some iconic symbols, like the Statue of Liberty screaming USA, or the Eiffel Tower standing tall for Paris. And this mask? Yeah, that's King Tut's, no doubt. Or is it? You'd think historians have squeezed every last drop of mystery from the story of King Tutankhamun. But guess what? Some of the most obvious details tend to slip right through our fingers, like the fact that this famous mask might not have even been made for him. Stick around and I'll explain. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. Now take a look at those holes. Yep, those are for earrings. No, it's not that ancient Egyptians were against jewellery or anything. In fact, in ancient Egypt, earrings were usually worn by women or high-status children. So if you know your history, you might say, wait, but wasn't Tutankhamun just a kid king? And you'd be right. He took the throne at just 9 years old and sadly didn't live very long. He died quite young. So maybe he did wear earrings as a little kid. But once he hit 9, he probably took them off. Makes sense, right? Well, not exactly. Here's the thing. Nobody expected him to die so young, definitely not at 9. So no one was prepping a burial mask for a child at that time, that sudden death. It suggests the mask was a last-minute solution, the best available option when Tut died. And there's more evidence the whole burial setup was rushed. Think about it. Even though Tut was mummified and could have waited a bit, his people wanted him to reach the afterlife as soon as possible. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at the mask. It's a masterpiece. No way was that thing made in a hurry. It's way more detailed than the other, more basic burial items found with him. Let's talk numbers for a sec. Tutankhamun's mask is about 21 inches tall, decked out in precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs around 2.5 kilograms, about 5.5 pounds. The whole mask weighs around 22.5 kilograms, that's nearly 50 pounds. Okay, now I'm a bit confused. So it's probably a kid's mask, but it has a beard? I don't know about you, but I've never seen a 9-year-old with a beard. Have you? Just think about it, a grown man's face versus a kid's. Fun fact, our facial features stop growing around age 16. So by 19, Tutankhamun would have definitely had a grown man's face. Now imagine trying to fit a child-sized mask onto a grown man's head. Yeah, no way. That would have been super awkward. Nobody would have let that happen, so let's scratch the kid mask theory. Option 2? Maybe the mask was originally made for a woman. That's where the beard theory comes in. Some researchers believe the beard was added later. Here's a twist for you. What if that mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself? And what if she never got to use it? If that's the case, we've got 2 mysteries solved with 1 clue. I know, this is starting to sound like some wild conspiracy theory, but hear me out, let's dig into the details. King Tut died around 1323 BC, possibly from malaria. He also had a broken leg and other health issues, so he wasn't in great shape. As for Nefertiti, there's no confirmed record of her death. No one really knows when or where she was buried. Some historians estimate she died around 1330 BC, but maybe she lived longer and the mask was made for her. Or maybe it was taken from her tomb. After all, they were family. She was supposedly Tut's stepmother, being married to Akhenaten, who's believed to be Tut's father. But that's still up for debate among scholars. Yeah, ancient Egyptian family trees are a mess. Still, I'm not totally sold on the idea that Tut wore a woman's mask. Let me hit you with another theory. Meet Howard Carter, the passionate archaeologist who discovered King Tut's tomb. It was found in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor, and to everyone's surprise, it was mostly intact. But Carter noticed something odd. The tomb didn't look like a typical pharaoh's burial site. It was fancy, sure, but it had features that suggested it was originally designed for a woman. Egyptian pharaohs usually had much larger, grander tombs. Even weirder? The tomb faced to the right of the entrance, which wasn't normal. That layout was more common for queens' tombs. Red flag number 2, the tomb seemed to be built in stages, and all the artifacts, about 2,000 of them, were shoved in there quickly, almost like an afterthought. That's right. The whole setup looked like it was thrown together fast, not custom-built for a pharaoh. The items inside looked like they belonged to other royals. Carter discovered the site in 1922, but the strange circumstances around the tomb kept historians guessing. Almost 100 years later, a researcher named Nicholas Reeves thought he had cracked the code. He proposed that King Tutankhamun might not have been the tomb's original occupant. Instead, he believed that Queen Nefertiti's burial chamber might actually be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's tomb. He studied high-resolution images of the tomb and months of examining every single pixel. One day he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb walls beneath layers of paint. He thought he saw the outlines of two doorways that had been sealed and plastered over to keep them hidden. The more he looked, the more real it seemed. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas guessed there might be a hidden storage room behind the west wall of King Tutankhamun's tomb, maybe even just one section of a larger network of corridor-like chambers. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? But sorry to break the illusion. Reeves's theory was eventually debunked. To see if he was right, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to detect the invisible. Reeves figured that if there were any gaps in the walls, it could mean there were more hidden rooms. At first, in 2015, one expert thought they had found a hidden chamber, but the glory didn't last. A year later, after double-checking, they confirmed there was nothing. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary Egyptian woman whose burial site remains a mystery. There's an amazing legend about Cleopatra that you might like. Supposedly, she once said, "No man will ever find my tomb." Fitting, in a way, because the person who came closest to finding her final resting place was a woman. Thousands of years after Cleopatra's death, and with no confirmed tomb, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she may have finally cracked the code of where Cleopatra II is buried. Martinez has been searching for nearly 20 years and recently found a marble bust she believes represents the famous queen. But not everyone agrees with her claim. Some experts argue the bust looks nothing like Cleopatra. Along with that intriguing sculpture, Martinez's team found 337 ancient coins, some of which feature a less debated image of Cleopatra. Still, nothing has been officially confirmed yet. There's definitely a small bust, carved from white marble, that fits in one hand and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from Egypt's Ministry of Tourism. But the big question in the world of archaeology is, who exactly does this bust represent? While Martinez insists it's Cleopatra II, many other archaeologists argue the facial features don't match. They believe it's more likely to be a depiction of a princess. Sorry to break the magic for a second, but some people think Cleopatra's statement, "No man will find my tomb," has been misunderstood. Even if she did say it, maybe she meant no living soul and it had nothing to do with gender. Maybe it's just a beautiful myth. For more than 3,000 years, the golden mask of Pharaoh Tutankhamun remained hidden in the Valley of the Kings. This 21-inch tall artifact showcases the incredible craftsmanship of ancient Egyptians. But no one expected X-rays to reveal its biggest secret. King Tutankhamun was the last ruler of his family during Egypt's 18th dynasty. He became king at just 9 years old but ruled for only about a decade. After his sudden death, he was largely forgotten by those who ruled after him. His tomb wasn't seen as very important, so much so that even grave robbers overlooked it. Kind of sad, right? But actually, it turned out to be a great thing for us. Since the tomb was basically forgotten, it remained completely untouched, while most other tombs in the Valley of the Kings were looted. His remains were sealed and untouched. So when the tomb was finally discovered in 1922, it contained over 5,000 priceless items and instantly made him world famous. Today, one of the most iconic pieces from that discovery is his golden mask. It's believed to be an exact likeness of his face, or at least that's what it was meant to be. We'll get back to that. The point of creating such a detailed likeness was to make sure the king's spirit could recognize his own body and continue living in the afterlife, according to ancient Egyptian beliefs. The mask looks insanely detailed, but people didn't really grasp how complex it was until much later. The first X-ray scans of the mask were taken in 1967. Back then, the main reason for scanning it was preservation. It was headed to Paris for an exhibit, the first time it had ever left Egypt. Scanning it helped experts track any changes during travel. and the images also offered clues about how the mask was made. But they didn't fully understand how advanced the construction was. I mean, Egyptian goldsmiths didn't have modern welding tools, so how did they build it? Later X-ray scans done in 2007 gave us some answers. It turns out the mask wasn't made of pure gold. It's made of 24-karat gold. But in reality, the mask was crafted from 23-karat gold, meaning it was mixed with another material. Experts discovered that the gold sheets contained a small amount of copper, a reddish-brown metal. This was probably done to make the material more flexible and easier to shape. They would heat and hammer the gold sheets over and over to form them. But there was another hidden secret inside the mask that wasn't discovered until 2015, a year before Egyptian museum staff in Cairo were preparing it for display when the long beard accidentally fell off. Another theory suggests the beard had simply loosened over time and eventually dropped on its own. The beard falling off King Tutankhamun's mask caused quite a bit of panic. After all, we're talking about one of Cairo's biggest tourist attractions. So experts had to act quickly to fix the issue. The restoration process began with a detailed recording of the mask's condition. To do that, they had to perform a full 3D scan of the artifact, and by chance, something really interesting was discovered inside the royal beard, a golden tube. It's a fascinating structure, believed to have been used by the ancient Egyptians to attach the beard to the rest of the mask. This once again showed that the process of making the mask was far more complex than experts had originally thought. But the mysteries didn't end there. Remember how it was once believed that the mask was a perfect representation of King Tutankhamun's face? Well, that might not be entirely true. Some popular theories now suggest that the mask wasn't even made for him, but for someone else. A 2015 study suggested that the mask was originally made for a female pharaoh, most likely his stepmother, the famous and beautiful Queen Nefertiti. The strongest clue comes from an inscription on the mask. At first glance, it seemed to belong to Tutankhamun, but after a closer look, researchers noticed something strange written beneath his name. It appeared that the royal name had been altered, originally referring to Queen Nefertiti. There's another feature of King Tut's golden mask that was overlooked for years, adding even more mystery. Experts believe that he wasn't highly respected by the pharaohs who came after him. One clue that led archaeologists to think this was the pierced ears on the mask. Some researchers believe King Tutankhamun stopped wearing earrings once he was no longer a child. So, according to their theory, by the time he died at 18, he shouldn't have been depicted with pierced ears. This also supports the idea that the mask may have originally belonged to Nefertiti, or maybe to someone who wasn't even related to Tutankhamun. But the mask isn't the only source of mystery. His tomb is full of unanswered questions too. Recently, historians found signs that the place where King Tut was meant to be buried was changed at the last minute. For years, experts have wondered why a pharaoh who ruled for 9 years ended up in such a simple tomb. Compared to the grand tombs of other pharaohs, his final resting place seemed unusually modest. The idea that a king like Tutankhamun would have such a plain burial doesn't quite match the level of power and importance he supposedly had in ancient Egypt. So what happened? Well, it seems like this might have had something to do with his successor, the Pharaoh I. After Tutankhamun's death, researchers believe A may have wanted to erase him from Egyptian history. One theory suggests A made the snap decision to bury Tut in a smaller, less impressive tomb. When experts examined A's tomb, they found something intriguing, a large wall decorated with painted baboons. That same kind of artwork also appears in Tutankhamun's tomb. It looks like the same person may have chosen the art for both tombs. Now the design and decoration of both tombs are nearly identical, suggesting they were the work of the same people. But there's one major difference. A's tomb is fit for a king, much larger and more impressive, despite having nearly the same style and artwork as Tut's. So the theory goes that A planned what went into both tombs. When Tutankhamun died unexpectedly at around 18 years old, his larger, grander tomb wasn't ready. Pharaohs usually started building their tombs while they were still alive to make sure everything was perfect, but because Tut died so young, there wasn't enough time. I may have taken advantage of the situation, arranged for a smaller tomb for Tut, and saved the bigger one for himself. Experts believe this theory explains the simplicity of Tutankhamun's tomb and how I managed to wipe his memory from history so easily. In the end, the story of King Tutankhamun's golden mask and tomb is filled with mystery and intrigue. Each new discovery sheds more light on what really happened all those years ago. But one thing is for sure, there are still secrets waiting to be uncovered. Ancient Egypt still has so many secrets to reveal, and King Tutankhamun's tomb will continue to fascinate people for years to come. Unlike most other tombs from ancient Egypt, King Tut's tomb stayed hidden and untouched by looters for 3,000 years. One reason is that it was smaller than average and tucked away in a place called the Valley of the Kings. The area had already been heavily explored when the tomb was discovered, and the entrance was completely buried under rubble from nearby tomb construction, which probably helped keep it secret. There were no markings or writings on the outside to indicate what was inside. Time played a big role in preserving the tomb so well until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally entered it. He was considered a hero, but recent discoveries suggest he might have been more cunning than we originally thought. People used to believe Carter wasn't just some glorified treasure hunter, that he was a real archaeologist. Even before finding King Tut's tomb, he was obsessed with Egyptian artifacts. That passion started when he was a kid, sketching sculptures and carvings found in ancient tombs. After the discovery, Carter spent a whole decade documenting and transporting all sorts of treasures, like golden thrones, chariots and statues, from the tomb across the Nile to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. At least, that's the official story. Recent evidence suggests not all the artifacts made it to Egyptian authorities. One secret letter reveals what was possibly Carter's unofficial policy: 10 for them, 1 for me. That letter was sent to Sir Alan Gardner, a linguist and friend of Carter's, and it was dated 1922. In it, Carter wrote about discovering the tomb and even asked Gardner for advice in another letter from 1934. Gardner seemed to thank Carter for a magical amulet he received as a gift. Carter claimed it wasn't from Tut's tomb, but clearly it was. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum was aware of Carter's shady dealings, but couldn't prove anything. He compared Gardner's amulet to one known to be from the tomb. They were identical. Gardner was so disappointed and embarrassed by the situation that he told Carter how upset he was in a later letter. Not exactly the kind of message you'd send to a close friend. But Gardner didn't throw Carter under the bus. Instead, he advised him to return the stolen artifacts to Cairo, just like we're advising you to like this video and subscribe to The Bright Side for more awesome stories from history. That's not the only shady rumour about Carter after his big find. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who'd worked with Carter, published some info in a little-known Cairo magazine. He claimed Carter had secretly opened the burial chamber himself and then sealed it back up before the official unveiling. Why would he do that? Well, the theory is that Carter and his crew may have entered the tomb early to grab a few valuable pieces for themselves. Clearly, they didn't dare sell anything while they were alive, but it looks like some of the items were sold at auctions after their deaths. Although Carter never officially admitted to any wrongdoing, he also never outright denied it. The Egyptian government, worried about more mysterious disappearances, eventually banned him from entering the tomb again. For a while, some even linked this alleged theft to the curse of the pharaoh. If you haven't heard of it, the story goes that anyone who messed with the boy king's tomb would be cursed with horrible luck. Not quite as dramatic as a mummy rampage, but still creepy. Rumours swirled that several people who disturbed Tutankhamun's final resting place died sudden and mysterious deaths. The most famous victim of the curse was George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who helped fund the tomb's excavation. He died just 1 year after the tomb was opened. People love to call that death mysterious, but in reality, Herbert was already in pretty bad health when he arrived in Cairo. He ended up suffering from a chronic illness that had nothing to do with curses. Now let's talk numbers. A lot of people were involved with that tomb. Guards, archaeologists, support staff. Sure, some of them died not long after the tomb opened to the public. And yeah, we kind of want the curse to be real because, hey, it makes for a great story. But statistically speaking, if you've got a group of people connected to a major tomb opening, it's not shocking that a few of them would die over time. In fact, the average lifespan of the people supposedly affected by the curse was more than 20 years after the tomb was opened. Herbert's daughter even lived into the 1980s, half a century later, and Howard Carter himself lived until 1935, which was 16 years after the Great Discovery. Some people suggested that the whole curse was actually just a clever PR strategy. As you might imagine, when King Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered, Carter wanted to keep nosy reporters away. So maybe he invented a curse that would haunt anyone who entered the boy king's final resting place. But what was actually taken from Tutankhamun's tomb? Some jewellery at first. In fact, a French expert believes Carter himself might have stolen it. Carter did some in-depth research by comparing old photos taken inside the tomb back in the 1920s with artifacts he found in museums and auction houses. He began piecing together some of Tut's missing jewellery. First, there was a collar that had been on Tut's chest. It was completely broken. Some pieces ended up at the Nelson Atkins Museum in Missouri via Carter, while others were made into a necklace owned by unknown individuals who tried to sell it in 2015, but failed. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum confirms this on their website. Then there's a piece of a headdress. Some beads from it belonged to Tutankhamun, and Carter apparently stole those too. They were made into a necklace that's now on display at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another lavish collar, made from glazed ceramic, spent some time at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Fortunately, it was returned to Egypt just over a decade ago. And yes, that one was also allegedly taken by Carter. Despite the missing artifacts, King Tutankhamun still left us with some incredible treasures that have helped us understand more about this fascinating ancient culture. One of the most iconic pieces is the golden funerary mask, 21 inches tall, inlaid with semi-precious stones and glass paste, weighing 22 pounds. It shows the boy, Pharaoh, with a long beard and a headdress featuring a cobra and a vulture. The mask includes a spell from an important ancient Egyptian religious text meant to help him succeed in the afterlife. Apparently, Tut was also a fan of board games. 4 game boards were found in his tomb, some made of ivory. Archaeologists even found a pair of golden sandals, though it's believed he probably didn't wear them in real life. They were likely just ceremonial. Speaking of fashion, it turns out Tut was a stylish ruler. A mannequin was discovered. The boy king seemed to enjoy music too. 2 trumpets were found in his tomb, and they were actually played during a BBC broadcast in 1935. Today, though, they're considered too fragile to handle. Egyptian archaeologists recently made an extraordinary discovery near Cairo, the oldest and most complete mummy ever found in Egypt. They kept it under wraps for a while. The 4,300-year-old mummy was uncovered in a cluster of tombs near the step pyramid of Djoser, dating back to Egypt's Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also found several other tombs, one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another to a secret guard who had the authority to perform private rituals. One especially interesting tomb belonged to a scribe and contains the largest statues ever discovered in the area. This massive burial site includes over a dozen pyramids and tombs. Then there's Hatshepsut, one of the most famous mummies in the world. Archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Her sarcophagus was empty. Carter did discover 2 coffins in another tomb, one belonging to Hatshepsut's nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether this mysterious woman was actually the Queen herself. They found a tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it. When they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramesses II was an impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that truly made history. We don't hear much about his father, though. Anyway, back to Ramesses. He's considered the most powerful pharaoh of ancient Egypt. He ruled for 6 full decades and lived over 90 years. Pretty amazing for that time period. It's said that he fathered over 100 children. Talk about a big family. When Ramesses died, he was buried in the Valley of the Kings. But grave robbers tried to steal his tomb and its treasures. So ancient officials secretly moved his body to protect it. Then there's Hatshepsut, one of the most famous mummies in the world. She ruled Egypt skillfully for nearly 20 years, built amazing structures, and opened new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. Carter did discover 2 coffins in another tomb, one belonging to Hatshepsut's nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether this mysterious woman was actually the queen herself. They found a tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it. When they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramesses II was an impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that truly made history. We don't hear much about his father, though. Anyway, back to Ramesses. He's considered the most powerful pharaoh of ancient Egypt. He ruled for 6 full decades and lived over 90 years. Pretty amazing for that time period. It's said that he fathered over 100 children. Talk about a big family. When Ramesses died, he was buried in the Valley of the Kings. But grave robbers tried to steal his tomb and its treasures. So, ancient officials secretly moved his body to protect it. While he was busy digging graves in the Valley of the Kings, he stumbled upon 2 mummies that might belong to Nefertiti and her daughter. According to experts, we might soon get a definitive answer about who these mummies actually are. And if one of them turns out to be Nefertiti, we're in for a pretty exciting surprise. DNA analysis and it's crazy to think how little we've uncovered beneath the surface of modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of power and prosperity, but sadly, she died during a period of social unrest, which is probably why her burial site was lost. So where is my mum? Back in the early 1920s, the world was fascinated by King Tutankhamun. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the young pharaoh's tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. But people weren't just interested in the gold and jewellery. The media went wild over the so-called pharaoh's curse. But was it really an ancient curse? Was that the real reason everyone who entered the pyramids started dying? It seemed like the only explanation for the mysterious deaths. The man who attended the opening of King Tut's burial chamber, George Herbert, the Earl of Carnarvon, died just 5 months later. He had also financed the excavation. Then there's Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Yep, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes. He claimed an evil force was behind the explorer's death. You'd think he was joking. But nope, he was dead serious. The press kept blaming the curse whenever another Egyptologist died. These were the scholars who studied ancient Egyptian culture. The archaeologists who opened King Tut's tomb began dying over the next 17 years. But the reason for their deaths wasn't exactly a mystery. One of them had Hodgkin's disease. Still, journalists all over the world kept pushing the curse story. It was kind of ridiculous, but surely science had a more logical explanation, right? Turns out it did. It all came down to a toxic mold. Aspergillus fungus can survive for ages in sealed tombs. When humans breathe it in, it can cause serious infections, especially in people with weakened immune systems. Doctors today believe that's what actually happened to those unlucky explorers over 100 years ago. Scientists now know this fungus thrives on grains. And guess what? King Tut's tomb was full of offerings like baskets of raw grain and bread. Researchers have even found other types of fungi on ancient Egyptian mummies, and some of these fungi can be dangerous to humans. The risk of organic material rotting is very real. Just think about your own fridge. Leftovers start to spoil after only 3 or 4 days. Now imagine food sealed in a tomb for thousands of years. And food's just one type of organic material. Even wood starts to rot if it's exposed to water or even just humidity. You don't have to go to Egypt to see this in action. Any abandoned building in your neighborhood will show you what it looks like. If a piece of wood gets wet and doesn't dry out, it'll start to break down from fungi or even burrowing insects, and the list goes on. Rotten wood is a serious structural problem. Floorboards and beams are usually made of wood, so if you walk into a crumbling building, you could easily fall through the floor. But that's just scratching the surface. Building materials have changed a lot since the days of the pharaohs, and so have the risks. Take asbestos, for example. Up until the 1970s, most insulation used in homes contained asbestos. It was used in everything from boilers to soundproofing. These tiny fibres were great for keeping heat in. But the US banned asbestos in 1989, and the UK followed about 10 years later. Why? Because asbestos becomes a serious health hazard when it gets damaged. If you breathe in those fibres, they can cause deadly diseases, and many abandoned buildings still have asbestos. Nobody's maintaining them. So yeah, that's a real danger. Another common hazard in old buildings is lead. The ancient Romans actually used lead pipes to carry spring water into their homes. They even cooked in lead pots, which, as we now know, was a terrible idea. Lead and water don't mix well because of something called corrosion, but that wasn't common knowledge back then. The US didn't ban lead pipes until 1986. That means about 7% of American homes still use them. And that's not the only source of lead poisoning. Up until the mid-1960s, builders used lead-based paint to coat wooden surfaces in homes. In abandoned buildings, that paint has long since started to break apart. If you touch windows or doors, you might stir up lead dust, and breathing that in is really bad for you. At least you can see lead dust with your own eyes. The same can't be said for carbon monoxide. This gas has no colour, so you can't see it, and no smell, so you can't detect it. It's basically invisible and odourless, which makes it all the more dangerous. How can you detect a carbon monoxide leak, and how does this dangerous gas usually escape? Poor maintenance. That's often the issue. And with abandoned buildings, there's usually no maintenance at all. One moment you're exploring an old factory, and the next you're dizzy with a pounding headache. These are just a few mild symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning. But what's the source? Sometimes it's just an old boiler finally giving out after years of neglect. This brings us to an important question. What's the biggest factor in indoor air quality? If you said oxygen levels, guess again. Turns out oxygen only drops by about 0.3% after 8 hours in a sealed room. And I mean really sealed, like taped up windows and doors. Under normal conditions, the drop is even less. So oxygen isn't the real problem. Carbon dioxide levels, on the other hand, rise quickly in a sealed space. That's because it's a direct result of us breathing. We inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. It's basically waste gas. Normally it's just 0.04% of the air. But in a closed room, high CO2 levels can make you feel super drowsy. And that's the last thing you want in a crumbling building. High CO2 also messes with your ability to think straight. Researchers at Harvard ran a study back in 2016. They had office workers come in 6 days in a row and take problem-solving tests. Each day they raised the CO2 levels in the simulated office. And guess what? Test scores kept dropping. Sure, there were other factors, but CO2 definitely made a difference. Now remember, this was a safe, modern office, not some sketchy building where you have to watch every step. And speaking of buildings and visitors, I really mean trespassers. Trespassing is a criminal offence in the US, whether it's private or public property. If you break the law, you could be fined up to $5,000 or even go to jail. That no trespassing sign, yeah, take it seriously, but even if you're inside, you might not be alone. You never know who else is in there or what they're up to, and it might not even be a person. Animals can be a threat too. You might freak out if you see a rat, but honestly, the poor thing is just as scared as you are, and it might bite. Rats carry tons of diseases, but that's not the only problem. They can cause serious damage too. Their teeth never stop growing, so they need to constantly gnaw on stuff to wear them down. If you've ever gotten the munchies at 1 a.m., you kinda get the vibe. Electrical cables are their favourite thing to chew on, and abandoned buildings are full of them. Even without rats, old wiring is dangerous on its own. Buildings built before 1984 often used aluminum wiring, while today we use copper. Why? Because aluminum is 55 times more likely to catch fire. Flip the wrong switch in an old sketchy building and it could cost you your life. So stay alert for red flags, flickering lights, sparks from outlets. The smell of smoke. Don't count on a ground wire to save you from getting shocked either. Ground wires didn't become standard until the 1960s. Okay, now let's rewind about 5,000 years. Let me take you back to ancient Egypt around 2550 BC. Guess what happened then? They started building the Great Pyramids of Giza. People had already figured out how to build cathedrals and skyscrapers, but those massive buildings only came along recently. Even modern scientists are still puzzled about how the pyramids were built all those thousands of years ago. No wonder the Great Pyramid is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one still standing today. It's also the oldest of them all. Building something of that scale, even by today's standards, must have taken serious teamwork. But the pyramids at Giza weren't the first ever built. The first was actually a step pyramid, constructed about 80 years earlier in 2630 BC for King Djoser. It wasn't meant to be extraordinary, but it turned out to be super impressive. The step pyramid had 6 levels of stone and stood 204 feet tall. That's about as tall as a 19-story building. It was the tallest thing around at the time, and it wasn't just a pyramid. It came with a full complex, including courtyards and other buildings. Ancient Egyptians believed in the afterlife, so everyone, especially the kings, wanted to be fully prepared. That's why the pyramid complex had all kinds of daily life stuff people might need in the next life: furniture, food, even golden dishes. Once pyramid building became common, lots of pyramids were left unfinished. It usually took around 20 years to build just one. But many pharaohs still tried. People usually think there are only a few pyramids in Egypt, but there are actually more than 100. The most famous ones are the Great Pyramids of Giza. The first and biggest was built for Pharaoh Khufu around 2550 BC. Thanks to the writings, researchers are able to study their language and grammar. The treasures that used to be in this pyramid were stolen a long time ago. From that room there are several tunnels leading to unknown destinations. In fact, there are tons of tunnels and passageways inside the pyramids, hidden chambers, columns, secret paths. Scientists have been sending in tiny robots with cameras for decades to explore. One of those robots even discovered another room up top that had hieroglyphs on the walls. But even today, a huge part of the pyramids remains a total mystery. There's no official blueprint or construction plan for how the pyramids were built. It's a puzzle no one solved in over 4,500 years. Recently, scientists started scanning the pyramid using X-rays to see what's inside, without even entering it. It's full of tight, mysterious tunnels. The Great Pyramid was built as the final resting place for the ancient Egyptian king Khufu. According to legend, when the French commander Napoleon went inside the Great Pyramid, he came out totally shaken and pale. He never told anyone what he saw in there, but whatever it was, people say it haunted him for the rest of his life. To get in, Napoleon would have had to go through a super-narrow, upward-sloping tunnel. Then he'd reach another corridor known as the Grand Gallery, which is much longer than the first one and paved with stone. Eventually, he'd arrive at the King's Chamber, the centerpiece of the Great Pyramid, lined with massive granite blocks, but it probably didn't look as majestic as we imagine. There were no hieroglyphs decorating the walls, because Egyptians only started decorating tomb chambers in later periods. Pharaoh tombs deep inside the pyramids were also filled with treasures, from gold items to the world's most precious jewelry. But of course all of that was looted long ago. The only thing that might have remained was a massive stone coffin that once held the king's mummy. To get there, you'd also pass through what's called the Queen's Chamber. But that room probably never held any queens. Pyramids were usually built for just one person. There are mysterious tunnels leading out. When you hear the word mummy, you might get chills down your spine, since most of us connect it with scary movie monsters. But in reality, mummies have helped us understand so much about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and how people coped with losing loved ones. The most famous mummies in the world come from ancient Egypt. They believed some form of life after death was possible, as long as certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the human body through mummification and putting the mummy in a well-furnished tomb, basically giving it its own fully equipped apartment. Why did they believe this? Because they were deeply connected to the natural world around them. They saw how the sun rose every day, followed by the moon, and how new life grew from plants even after they withered. So they placed 11 boat oars inside, but no actual boat was ever found. While excavating King Tutankhamun's pyramid, the place was filled with the pharaoh's favourite scents and perfumes. Turns out it had been looted way back in ancient times. The doors were damaged, and there were traces of oils left in empty jars. Looks like someone was after the gold. Among the fragrances and oils left for coconut oil and frankincense. Seems like the pharaoh enjoyed board games too. There was a portable ivory senet set in his tomb. We don't know exactly how it was played, but it seems to have been an ancient Egyptian version of a board game for 2 players, where the goal was to knock the opponent off the board. We're not entirely sure who Tutankhamun's mother was. The ancients, they'd shave their eyebrows when they lost a cat, so it's not too surprising they placed some really strange items inside the pyramids. Archaeologists found collections of mummified cats and scarab beetles in pyramids dating back over 4,000 years, discovered in the Saqqara pyramid south of Cairo. They also found makeup tools and mirrors. Both men and women proudly wore makeup in ancient Egypt, with eyeliner being the most common cosmetic. The Rosetta Stone was one of the greatest discoveries ever made in the pyramids. Napoleon Bonaparte and his team found it. It's a black granite rock dating back to 196 BCE, inscribed in both Greek and hieroglyphics. When it was translated in 1822, it became the key to understanding ancient Egyptian civilization and hieroglyphics for the first time. The discovery of Queen Hatshepsut's mummy in 1903 forever changed our understanding of the Egyptians. After her death, her successor Thutmose III removed most evidence of her reign, so we knew almost nothing about Egypt's first great female ruler. Now she's one of the most famous pharaohs of Egypt. Even Pharaoh Khufu had a full boat in his pyramid. Archaeologists discovered over 200 pieces of a massive boat near the Great Pyramid in Giza. They reassembled it, and it's about 144 feet long. It's likely a solar boat designed to carry the resurrected king with the god Ra. Fun fact: the Great Pyramid of Giza is the last remaining wonder of the ancient world. The other 6 wonders were the Hanging Gardens, the Colossus, the Temple of Artemis, the Mausoleum, the Lighthouse, and the Statue of Zeus. This pyramid was also the tallest man-made structure in the world for 3,800 years, and is the largest pyramid in Egypt. It took 2.3 million limestone blocks to build, some weighing up to 80 tons. It required 100,000 workers and took 23 years to complete. Its original height was 480 feet. In 2017, archaeologists discovered something strange in the Great Pyramid of Egypt, a hidden void at least 100 feet long, and no one knows why it's there or what's inside. This mysterious void is the first internal structure discovered inside the 4,500-year-old pyramid since the 19th century. Scientists used cosmic rays to detect the massive cavity, but they're still far from uncovering what's inside. The ancient Egyptians put a lot of effort into their constructions. Building the pyramids and everything else was strategically arranged and structurally sound, so it's unlikely that this hole was caused by blocks collapsing over time. Many pyramids also contain small models called ushabti. These represented servants believed to come to life to serve the pharaohs in the afterlife. Surprisingly, all these items actually fit inside the pyramids. There's not much space inside the structures. They're mostly just solid rock. When you hear the word mummy, you might get chills down your spine because most of us associate it with those scary characters from horror movies. But in reality, mummies have helped us understand a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and how people dealt with the loss of loved ones. The most famous people globally for their mummies are the ancient Egyptians. They believed that some form of existence after death was possible if certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the human body through mummification and placing the mummy in a fully furnished tomb, almost like giving them their own private apartment. Why did they believe this? Because they were closely connected to their natural environment. They often observed natural cycles around them, like how the sun rises every day, followed by the moon, or how new life always sprouts from plants even after they wither. They also believed that the powerful spirit Osiris, representing the cycle of death and rebirth, played a role in this process to prepare for the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians followed specific rituals like mummification, which involved using substances like honey resins and incense to preserve the body. No mummy is more famous than that of King Tutankhamun. He was a young pharaoh who ruled over 3,000 years ago. In Egypt, the problem with discovering ancient royal tombs is that most of these burial sites had been previously looted. People knew that ancient rulers were buried with many valuable possessions, making these sites targets for thieves. When King Tutankhamun's tomb was opened in 1922, folks were excited because it hadn't been looted like many other royal tombs discovered earlier. This shows how well it was hidden. Inside, Tutankhamun's mummy was wrapped in 3 coffins, including one made of gold. The items found in his tomb revealed what ancient Egypt was like. Studying his mummy helped us learn about the culture and common practices at the time of his death. We also learned about his family through DNA analysis. Scientists discovered he had malaria and a foot problem that might have made walking difficult. Ramesses II was another pharaoh in Egypt who ruled for 68 years, a very long time back then. He was known for his expansion campaigns and construction projects. Many artifacts from his reign still exist today, including a large statue of him. Ramesses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to around 90 years old. After examining his mummy, scientists concluded he might have had a medical condition affecting his spine. Remember those thieves I mentioned earlier? They're probably the reason Ramesses II was placed in a plain coffin within a secret collection of royal mummies in Deir el-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Fortunately, archaeologists were able to identify him, although it was challenging because his journeys were recorded on his wrappings. The process was extremely laborious. In ancient Egypt, mummification took 70 days. A designated person would recite very specific speeches while carefully handling the body and drying it using a type of salt called natron. They also used linen and resin to make the body look more lifelike and wrapped it in cloth. Tombs held similar significance for the ancient Egyptians. For example, the walls of King Tutankhamun's tomb were decorated with intricate artwork depicting his journey to the afterlife, from his funeral procession to his passage through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed everyone undertook this journey after death, so they filled their tombs with items and paintings to aid the person in their spiritual travels. Additionally, the tomb walls were adorned with spells from a special book containing a collection of poems that the Egyptians believed helped people reach the afterlife, emphasizing the importance of this journey. People placed food in these ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists discovered 36 jars of ancient drinks and baskets of fruit, believed to have been left there to assist him on his journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that traveling to the afterlife took a long time, so they left plenty of provisions like food and water to support their loved ones. Pharaohs also generally kept many luxurious clothes and beautiful jewelry in their tombs to ensure a stylish journey. These items included various types of linen garments like jackets, scarves, gloves, and head coverings. There was also a lot of gold jewelry adorned with gemstones, such as bracelets, buckles, necklaces, rings, and even images of precious insects for protection. Some were even placed with fans made of ivory and ostrich feathers to keep them cool in the afterlife. Some ancient rulers were even buried in their permanent apartments with boats. For instance, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid in Giza. His tomb and a large ship were found inside King Tut's tomb. However, he was buried with many boat oars, but no actual boat. He had 3 chariots and several walking sticks made of precious materials, suggesting he might have preferred to travel to the afterlife by land rather than sea. Among the most interesting items found near ancient mummies were bottles of oils and perfumes. If rulers were meant to be elegant, why shouldn't they smell good too? Exactly. Some of them also had ancient types of board games, mostly made from valuable materials like gold or ivory. One of these games was called Senet, which was very popular among the ancient Egyptians and quite similar to modern chess. The ancient Egyptians might have had the most famous mummies, but they weren't the first to invent the process. In fact, it all started in South America with an ancient civilization called the Chinchorro. As we know today, these people were the first ones to mummify their loved ones. They started doing this around 2,000 years before the Egyptians began their own mummification rituals. Sure, we can learn a lot about ancient rulers by studying these mummies, but up until recently, we had no idea what they actually looked like while they were alive. Not too long ago, archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian relics discovered some incredibly unique mummy portraits. These images are super detailed paintings of individuals made while they were still alive. They were usually painted on wood, unlike the classic portraits we're used to seeing on canvas. These paintings are known for how realistic and beautiful they are, and researchers have actually used them to diagnose diseases by comparing the paintings to the mummified remains. Some of these portraits even include jewelry that was later found on the mummies themselves. A recent discovery of these portraits in Middle Egypt is a big deal because it's the first time in over 100 years that any new ones have been found. Mummified remains have turned up all over the world naturally, without any human involvement. Mummification can happen because of natural conditions, like extremely hot or cold environments, places with very little oxygen, or accidental exposure to chemicals that preserve the body. These conditions prevent bacteria from growing, so the body stays almost perfectly intact. One famous example is Otzi, the Iceman, a man who lived around 5,000 years ago in Europe. When he was discovered in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities at first thought he was a modern mountain climber because his body was so well preserved. But once they removed him from the glacier, they found out he was actually from the Copper Age. You've probably heard of Nikola Tesla, and you've definitely heard about the Great Pyramids of Egypt. But what if I told you that Tesla might have actually unlocked the ancient mystery behind the pyramids? Wait, what? A crossover episode? Not really. It's totally possible that the secrets of the pyramids are hiding in plain sight. But first, let's recap what we know. What's the big mystery surrounding them? I mean, they're just old buildings, right? Kinda weird, though. One of the biggest questions is, how were they built? Some people think the pyramids were made entirely by hand, with human muscle and effort. Others believe that maybe there was some kind of unknown energy source involved. Something we haven't discovered yet. Like, what if aliens helped? Okay, that's probably a joke. Maybe. Still, the idea that the pyramids were built using some kind of mysterious energy has been around for ages, even in ancient texts, like the pyramid texts. These writings talk about how the gods gave humans something powerful to help them build. So maybe, just maybe, there was something truly strong and mysterious going on in the past. Who knows? In the early 1900s, Tesla became obsessed with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. He read tons of books about them and was fascinated by the amount of energy they seemed to contain. Back then, most people didn't know much about electricity, but Tesla started to wonder, could there be some kind of advanced technology hidden inside the pyramids? He came up with the idea that the pyramids might actually work with electromagnetism. He spent a lot of time and effort trying to figure out the mystery. Tesla had some wild theories about the Great Pyramids. He thought they could store and transmit electricity, possibly to power the surrounding areas. He also believed they might have been built using some kind of crystal energy. Tesla thought the rooms inside the pyramids could hold super-powerful crystals that could control electromagnetic fields, but that's not even the craziest part. He also had a theory that the materials used to build the pyramids had special properties that could trap energy from the sun and the moon, and not just a little bit of energy. He believed the pyramids could generate massive energy fields that could light up entire cities or even bring light to dark places. In Tesla's mind, the pyramids could act like giant power stations, creating electricity and running machines. He even thought they were connected to the universe somehow, a kind of spiritual energy that could be used for healing or enlightenment. Pretty out there for his time. Anyway, Tesla wasn't just pulling these ideas out of nowhere. He was seriously into studying everything about the pyramids, from artifacts and ancient texts to hieroglyphics and drawings. And he came up with the idea that the pyramids were designed to be energy amplifiers, and that some unknown energy source was used to build them. Some people thought Tesla was a little crazy for saying all this, but honestly, his ideas have had a huge influence on how we think about the pyramids today. Researchers and scientists have been digging into his theories for years. Scientists are now using cutting-edge technology to uncover some of the biggest mysteries surrounding these ancient structures. For example, researchers recently applied theoretical physics to study how the Great Pyramid of Giza interacts with certain radio waves. They discovered that if the radio waves are at a specific wavelength, the pyramid can actually concentrate energy inside its chambers and beneath its base. To figure this out, the scientists ran lots of calculations. First, they tested which radio wavelengths would work best. Then they created a model of how the pyramid would react to those waves. They calculated how much energy would get absorbed or scattered. Finally, they studied how the energy moved inside the pyramid when the waves hit it. To do all this, they used something called multipole analysis, which breaks a complex object down into simpler parts so you can understand how each piece reacts to incoming energy. Think of it like taking apart a puzzle to see how all the pieces fit together. What really excites researchers is how this could be used in the future. They're imagining tiny particles that could do the same thing as the pyramid, but with light, By adjusting the size, shape and material of the particles, they could control how light moves around them. That could be super helpful for building advanced sensors or high-efficiency solar panels. The scientists had to make a few assumptions during their study. They assumed there were no hidden chambers in the pyramid and that the materials used in construction were consistent. But even with those guesses, they made some amazing discoveries. And studying the pyramid isn't the only evidence that Nikola Tesla was way ahead of his time. There are many of Tesla's projects that seemed impossible back then, but scientists and enthusiasts are revisiting them today and trying to bring them to life. Let's talk about one of Tesla's most ambitious projects, the Wardenclyffe Tower. Back in 1900, Tesla was already a big name in American electrical engineering. People were blown away by his incredible inventions and the fact that he had outshined Thomas Edison in the battle of currents. But Tesla wasn't content with what he'd already accomplished. He launched his most daring project yet, the Wardenclyffe Tower, which was built between 1901 and 1905. It was based on one of Tesla's groundbreaking ideas, a global wireless communication system. His plan was to use the Earth itself as a conductor to transmit music, news, stock market updates, military communications, and even faxed images. Sound familiar? Yeah, it sounds just like the internet, but without any wires. But Tesla dreamed even bigger. He wanted to transmit electrical power wirelessly too. He had already shown that it was possible to send high-frequency signals wirelessly using Tesla coils, and that fired up his passion for wireless power transmission. He didn't just want to change the way we communicate. He wanted to find a way to send electricity all around the world by tapping into the Earth's natural energy. Tesla believed there was plenty of free energy around us, just waiting to be used for the benefit of humanity. In 1899, he carried out some top-secret experiments and became convinced that electricity could be transmitted through the upper atmosphere. That's what led to the creation of the Wardenclyffe Tower. It was supposed to be a prototype for a network of towers across the globe that would deliver wireless power everywhere. Sadly, Tesla didn't have the resources or the patience of his investors to finish the project. He ran into financial trouble and other setbacks. In 1917, the unfinished tower was finally torn down and sold for scrap to pay off Tesla's growing debts. Now the tower is a bittersweet reminder that even the greatest minds sometimes fall short of making their dreams come true. However, Tesla's original red brick lab still stands. It's the only Tesla lab that's still around. Here's a fun fact. In 2017, a documentary crew made an incredible discovery. They used ground-penetrating radar to explore the area around Wardenclyffe and found a whole network of tunnels running hundreds of feet underground. No one knows exactly what they were used for, but for years people have speculated they were part of Tesla's master plan. Wardenclyffe is now a major landmark for Tesla fans from around the world. Who knows? Maybe someday someone will finally solve the mystery of those tunnels. But even if they don't, Tesla's legacy and brilliant ideas live on. And if someone ever invents time travel and you go back in time, you might not recognize a lot of things we take for granted today, like the Statue of Liberty, the Egyptian pyramids, or even simple tools like the remote control. Man, the tools we use today, even your laptop and the corn you eat at lunch, have changed in ways you wouldn't believe. Back when the pyramids were first built in ancient Egypt, in Giza and other spots, they didn't look like dusty, sandy blocks at all. Nope. They were all covered in shiny white limestone. If you saw them under the blazing African sun, you'd probably have to squint because they were so smooth and bright. That's how polished and gleaming they were. The builders used something like 6 million tons of that limestone just for the Great Pyramid of Giza, the biggest one still standing if you ever visit Egypt. But the locals back then were super resourceful. They reused a bunch of the outer stones for other construction projects. And a massive earthquake in the 14th century knocked off a lot of the limestone too. That's why you don't see much of it today, though some of it's still hanging on. On top of the Pyramid of Khafra in Giza, you'll notice it looks like it has a second, smaller peak. Back in the day, all the pyramids had top stones, kind of like caps, called pyramions. These were covered in a mix of materials and most of them had gold or silver, but over the centuries a lot of that got lost or stolen. You can still spot a few of them in museums showing carvings of Egyptian gods. It's believed pyramids were inspired by a sacred pointed stone, the Ben, which represented the sun's rays. Now, lifting heavy stones isn't exactly a piece of cake, especially without the kind of tech we have today. You'd get it if you've ever helped your friends move and got stuck carrying the couch. But those smart Egyptians had it figured out. They chose the pyramid shape because it spreads the weight evenly, which made the whole structure stronger. Speaking of changes, the Statue of Liberty went through a wild transformation too. When it was first unveiled in 1886, believe it or not, it was a shiny brown colour, like a brand new penny. But 20 years later it turned green. It wasn't a design choice, it was science. The statue is covered in super-thin sheets of copper, and when copper reacts with air it forms a protective layer called patina. That patina keeps the copper underneath from corroding. That's why copper statues and stuff last so long. When Lady Liberty turned green, the powers that be actually wanted to paint over her. There was no social media back then, so nobody could just drop an angry comment online. But people did complain about it in newspapers. The New York Times even talked to a copper and bronze manufacturer, and he said painting it would ruin the statue by stripping off the protective layer. Over the years, people have suggested painting her again, but thankfully, no one's actually done it. Honestly, I don't know about you, but I can't picture her in any colour but green. Let's talk bananas. You love them, I love them, but next time you bite into that soft, juicy fruit, give some credit to selective breeding. Wild bananas had giant, hard seeds and weren't all that tasty. And how about watermelons? They go way back, over 5,000 years. But the early ones were bitter and had pale, yellowish flesh. They were also super hard to crack open. Selective breeding made them sweet and easy to enjoy. Japanese scientists even went the extra mile and made seedless ones. Now corn. Its grandma was a wild Mexican grass called teosinte. The kernels were tiny and hard to get at. Thousands of years ago, farmers started saving seeds from plants with the biggest, tastiest or easiest to grind kernels. Thanks to them, we got delicious edible corn today. And you ever seen a wild avocado? They were teeny tiny. You could hold one in your palm. And the pit inside was so huge, there wasn't much edible fruit around it. Plus, the skin was super tough compared to what we're used to now. Now let's talk computers. You probably can't get through the day without yours. I know I can't. But it's hard to say exactly who to thank for inventing the thing. One of the early contenders for the first computer title is the Atanasoff Berry computer, or ABC, built in 1942 at Iowa State University. The thing weighed over 700 pounds. Yeah, your laptop's a lot lighter. The ABC had about 300 vacuum tubes and a rotating drum, kind of like a paint can, with little capacitors on it. Capacitors are components that can store electrical charge, kind of like a battery. The ABC could solve problems involving up to 29 different variables, which really helped scientists save time. And just like our modern machines, it used binary code, ones and zeros, to represent all the data and numbers. Here's my favorite part. The ABC could perform one operation every 15 seconds. Just to give you an idea, today's tech does that in nanoseconds. Unlike today's computers, the ABC didn't have stored programs, so it could only do one thing at a time. No multitasking. The evolution of remote controls and elevators. Remote controls have come a long way. Nikola Tesla, the pioneer of alternating current, introduced one of the first wireless remote controls in 1898. He showcased his invention, called the teleautomaton, by demonstrating a radio-controlled miniature boat at Madison Square Garden. The boat had a small metal antenna, and Tesla sent signals using a box equipped with a lever and telegraph key, effectively controlling the boat's rudder and propeller. The concept of remote control quickly expanded to other devices. In 1950, Zenith Radio Corporation introduced the first commercially successful TV remote control, aptly named the Lazy Bones. It was connected to the TV via a long cable, and featured two buttons on top for channel and volume control. However, users often found the cable cumbersome and prone to tripping. If you've ever lived or worked on a high floor, you can appreciate the invention of the passenger elevator. The first successful passenger elevator was installed on March 23, 1857, in the E.V. Hochwut building in New York City. It operated at a speed of 40 feet per minute, which pales in comparison to today's elevators that can travel at 40 feet per second. Initially powered by a steam engine hidden in the building's basement, the elevator was more of a novelty than a necessity. At the time, Elisha Otis revolutionized elevator safety by inventing a safety brake that prevented the elevator from falling if the hoisting rope broke. He dramatically demonstrated this at the 1853 New York World's Fair by cutting the elevator's rope while standing on the platform, which safely stopped after a short drop. This innovation paved the way for the widespread adoption of elevators and the development of skyscrapers. Old Natur's Neanderthal fiber technology. In 2020, archaeologists made a groundbreaking discovery that challenged our perceptions of Neanderthals. At the Abri du Maras site in France, they found a 3-ply cord fragment made from inner bark fibres on a stone tool, dating back over 40,000 years. This is the oldest known direct evidence of fibre technology. The ability to create twisted fibres implies a sophisticated understanding of materials and mathematics, indicating that Neanderthals were capable of complex tasks like making clothing, ropes, and net re-evaluating pyramid construction. For a long time it was believed that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built by 100,000 slaves over 20 years, a claim made by the Greek historian Herodotus. However, modern archaeological findings suggest otherwise. Excavations have uncovered evidence of a well-organized workforce consisting of skilled laborers who worked in shifts and lived in nearby workers' villages. These workers received proper nutrition, medical care, and compensation, indicating that they were not slaves but rather respected laborers. Back then, there weren't many workers, and they lived with their families near the construction site. Archaeologists know this because they've found bakeries and homes filled with bread jars and other goodies. Turns out the pharaohs were pretty decent bosses, and the job market wasn't all that bad. They even kept detailed papyrus records of the construction and hieroglyphs. Honestly, I have no shot at reading those picture-like letters. Egyptologists had the same issue. For over 1,000 years, nobody used that kind of writing, and it's not like there was an ancient Egyptian English dictionary lying around. But everything changed. In 1822, the French found a broken slab of black granite. It had a single text written in 3 scripts: Ancient Greek, Hieroglyphic, and Demotic. Demotic was also Egyptian, but in a simpler script. Experts dated it back to 196 BC, and the content was religious French linguist and Orientalist Jean-François Champollion was the first to crack the ancient Greek letters. As you can see, people hadn't forgotten ancient Greek letters. The French managed to match the Greek letters with the Egyptian ones. Finally, we could read hieroglyphs. The name of the granite piece that made all this possible, the Rosetta Stone. Its discovery went beyond archaeology. The term Rosetta Stone even made its way into the English dictionary. It represents a discovery that helps people understand a long-standing mystery. There are similar games. A symbol corresponds to a certain message, and you have to decode the message by replacing the symbol with the matching letter. In short, that's what scientists did with the Rosetta Stone over 2 centuries ago. Do you know what the oldest deciphered language in Europe is? It has a not-so-attractive name. The text belongs to Mycenaean Greek, predating the ancient Greek alphabet by several centuries. You can easily guess which text it descends from. The people of Crete used Linear B script over 1,000 years ago during the Late Bronze Age. The Greek civilization that used this script vanished. No one could read Linear B, and more importantly, no one even knew it existed. That was about to change in the early 20th century. A British archaeologist named Sir Arthur Evans excavated a massive palace complex in Knossos, Crete. This was the centre of the Minoan culture that produced the mysterious script. The palace had around 1,300 rooms, with colourful paintings of dolphins, griffins and bulls. All of this captivated the archaeologists' imagination, but their biggest find was initially thousands of burnt clay tablets that were overlooked. The fire that destroyed the palace actually helped preserve the tablets. Reading the tablets was impossible, even though they were written in an unknown language. The scientific community had to wait another half-century before Michael Ventris cracked the code. He was a British architect and cryptography expert. Ventris studied Greek and Latin while attending lectures by the famous archaeologist. The young man decided to solve the Linear B mystery once and for all, and he succeeded in 1952. One of Ventris's most surprising discoveries was that the text was an ancient form of Greek. However, the code for Linear A remains unsolved. This writing system will remain a mystery until another enthusiastic young person like Michael Ventris comes along. They didn't have to be professional archaeologists, and Basil Brown certainly wasn't. In 1939, he discovered the richest early medieval burial in Europe. This happened in Sutton Hoo, southeast England. It wasn't your typical stone grave. It was a full-sized ship, 3 times the length of a double-decker London bus. And that's not all. The ship was filled with treasures. There were fancy hanging bowls, dining vessels, golden clothing accessories and luxurious textiles, just some of the treasures. Archaeologists were also amazed by the silverware found from distant Byzantium. You might know this city as Istanbul, Turkey, even today. It's several days' drive from Sutton, so imagine how much time and money it took to import a silver dish in the 7th century. Then the ship sank. According to archaeologists, the English couldn't have done that at the time. England didn't even exist. The inhabitants of the British Isles back then were the Anglo-Saxons. The ship from the grassy mounds in Suffolk might have belonged to one of their kings. We'll never know. The local acidic soil erased any potential evidence, or maybe no one was placed there in the first place. It might have been a memorial built to honour an important figure. Archaeologists still don't have a definitive answer, but what they found in Sutton shed light on the Dark Ages before the discovery. The shipbuilders didn't know much about what happened in Britain after the Romans left. Now, the picture of early Anglo-Saxon society is much clearer. Maybe English soil will be the next big breakthrough in archaeology. Imagine working 7 days a week on a massive construction site, carrying millions of stone blocks with thousands of others and stacking them on top of each other according to a complex system. You're working without modern building equipment. There's no air conditioning and no permanent water source. The weather is so hot that you could fry an egg on the road. You've been building the pyramid for decades, and now, when it's finally finished, you enjoy the results of the hard work of thousands of people. You look at the giant cultural landmark of global value that will freeze in time and amaze people for thousands of years. A few thousand years pass. People in the 21st century see the pyramids and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe humans built this." Yes, the pyramid builders wouldn't appreciate this theory, but in reality there are reasons to believe that people built them using ink for weather forecasting. But this theory was debunked because the statue had no holes or markings except for the one made in the Cairo Museum to secure displays on a stick. So there was no way to hang it in the past. Nearly a century after the bird was discovered, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Marsi proposed a new theory suggesting that it might have been a model for a monoplane. He believed the bird lacked a horizontal tailplane. Otherwise, its wings would have been attached at a right angle, like modern airplanes, and perhaps it was designed to generate the aerodynamic lift necessary for flight. Dr. Macy also claimed that it was common at the time to place miniature models of technological inventions in tombs, and the ancient Egyptians did just that. The ancient Egyptians, they invented the airplane around 200 BC, which upset the Wright brothers, who are considered the inventors of flight, because they didn't conduct their first flight until 1903. There's one way to be sure, testing the model. But as you know, it's unlikely that the old Cairo Museum would allow one of its precious exhibits to fly as if it were a toy. That's why glider designer Martin Gregory built a similar model, this time out of balsa wood, and concluded that even without the plane's tail, it wasn't a good flying plane. The case was solved. This didn't seem convincing enough for the History Channel, so they brought in an aerodynamics expert to build another replica of the bird. He tested it in conditions similar to those in Egypt and was impressed by the small plane's capabilities. So if they had invented the prototype of an airplane in the time of the Pharaohs, it would have been a great example of a unique artifact, a piece ahead of its time in both technology and history. The Saqqara bird, it is not the only example of this revolutionary concept. In 1901, a group of divers recovered the Antikythera mechanism from a shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. It was dubbed the world's first analog computer and is now believed to date back to around 100 BC. The bronze mechanism, it could determine the position of the sun, moon, planets and stars, as well as the phase of the moon, upcoming solar eclipses and even the speed of the moon's movement in the sky. No one is sure who used it, how or where it was made, but it's clear that it was extremely accurate and advanced for its time. The world's first flush toilet was invented in the mid-20th century, just a joke for the ancient Mediterranean residents. The island of Crete and the Indus Valley civilization came up with this amazing invention at the same time. About 4,000 years ago, plumbing and sanitation was so advanced that no one could design anything better for the next 2,000 years. An ancient Minoan toilet was discovered in the palace of Knossos. It appeared to have a wooden seat placed over a tunnel that directed water from an above-ground tank to underground drains. Other types used water from pitchers, and only the wealthy could afford such luxury. So, if you wanted to buy property back then, a toilet with running water would have been a clear sign that you were in the rich neighborhood. Automated doors were a new and impressive invention in 1931, but the technology behind them is actually much older. It's believed that the mathematician and engineer Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century AD created a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. To operate it, you needed to light a fire to generate heat. There was a copper vessel beneath it, half full of water. The inventor connected the copper vessel to containers that acted as weights. When the fire burned, the water moved into the containers. They sank and pulled the ropes. It wasn't like a supermarket door opening in front of you before you even had the chance to get close. Opening the morning bird's door took hours, and there was no way to stop the process. That's why the door was only opened once a day, before people entered the temple, to add some mystery to it. During the ceremonies, things that looked terrifying seemed like the first ever battery. It was invented in Baghdad about 2,000 years ago. A German archaeologist found this oval-shaped clay jar in 1938. Scholars are still unsure of its purpose and who exactly invented it. One theory is that it was used for electroplating objects with precious metals, where they filled it with a weak acid like vinegar. The battery produced about 1 volt of electricity. Another theory suggests it was a container for sacred manuscripts. Would you like to buy specially designed contact lenses? By Leonardo da Vinci in 1508, he invented his own form of glass. Humans love solving puzzles. So many attempts have been made to explain the use of the bird. First, and simply it was something celebratory. Second, it was a toy for a child from an important family, and maybe it was some kind of rebound, a common concept in ancient Egypt. Then a theory emerged that the bird was used as a weather vane, but this theory was debunked because the statue didn't have any holes or markings, except for the one created in the Cairo Museum to secure exhibits on a rod, so there was no way to hang it back then. About a century after the bird was discovered, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Masih proposed a new theory, suggesting it might have been a model for a monoplane. He thought the bird lacked a horizontal tail plane, or else its wings would have been attached at a right angle, similar to modern planes, and it might have been designed to generate the aerodynamic lift necessary for flight. Dr. Masih also claimed that it was common at the time to place miniature models of technological inventions in tombs, and the ancient Egyptians did the same. The ancient Egyptians invented the airplane around 200 BC, which upset the Wright brothers, who were considered the inventors of flight, because they didn't make one of their first flights until 1903. There's one way to be sure: test the model. But as you know, it's unlikely that the Egyptian Museum in Cairo would allow one of its precious exhibits to fly around like a toy. For that reason, glider designer Martin Gregory built a similar model, this time from balsa wood, and concluded that even without the airplane's tail, it wasn't a good flyer. The case was solved. This wasn't convincing enough for the History Channel, so they called in an aerodynamics expert to build another replica of the bird. They tested it under weather conditions similar to those in Egypt, and they were impressed with the small plane's capabilities. So, if they had invented the prototype of an airplane in the time of the Pharaohs, it would be a great example of a unique artifact, a piece that far preceded its time in both technology and history. The Saqqara bird is not the only example of this revolutionary concept. In 1901, a group of divers recovered the Antikythera mechanism from a shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. It was called the world's first analog computer, and its dating is now thought to be around 100 BC. This bronze mechanism could determine the positions of the sun, moon, planets and stars, as well as the moon's phase, the dates of upcoming solar eclipses, and even the moon's speed in the sky. No one is sure who used it, how or where it was made, but it's clear that it was incredibly accurate and advanced for its time. The first flushing toilets in the world were invented in the mid-20th century, just a joke for the ancient Mediterranean dwellers. The island of Crete and the Indus Valley civilization came up with this brilliant invention at the same time. Around 4,000 years ago, plumbing and sanitation was so advanced that no one could design anything better, even after 2,000 years. An ancient Minoan toilet was discovered in the palace of Knossos. It appeared to be equipped with a wooden seat placed over a tunnel that directed water from a tank on the surface to underground drains. Other types used pitchers to provide water, and only the wealthy could afford all this luxury. So if you wanted to buy a property back then, having a flushing toilet would have been a clear indication that you were in the rich neighborhood. Automatic doors became a great new invention in 1931, but the technology behind them is actually much older. It is believed that the mathematician and engineer Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century AD invented a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. To operate it, you had to light a fire to generate heat. There was a copper vessel underneath, half full of water. The inventor connected the copper vessel to containers acting as weights. When the fire was lit, the water moved into the containers. They descended and pulled ropes. It wasn't like a supermarket door that opens in front of you before you get a chance. It took hours to open the sad door, and there was no way to stop the process. That's why the door only opened once a day before people entered the temple, to add a sense of mystery to it. During ceremonies, It looked like the first battery ever created. It was invented in Baghdad around 2,000 years ago. In 1938, a German archaeologist found this oval-shaped clay jar. Scholars are still unsure of its purpose and who exactly invented it. One theory suggests that it was used for coating things with precious metals by filling it with a weak acid like vinegar. The battery produced about 1 volt of electricity. Another theory claims it was a container for sacred manuscripts. Would you like to buy custom-designed contact lenses? Leonardo da Vinci invented them in 1508, creating a lens out of steel equipped with a funnel on one side, designed to be worn with water inside to improve vision. Sounds a bit annoying, right? After about a century, French scientist René Durt improved the idea and made corneal contact lenses the lenses of the future, as they touch your eyes. The hydraulic lift system, this giant water-powered elevator, could have been used to raise the heavy stones needed to build the pyramid. It worked like a volcano, but instead of volcanic lava, imagine a large, deep hole in the center of the pyramid site. Inside this hole, there was a massive wooden platform, almost like a giant raft moving up and down. When the workers wanted to lift a heavy stone, they would fill the pit with water. As the water level rose, the wooden platform would float, carrying the stone with it, almost like a giant water-powered elevator. When the stone reached the desired height, workers would pull it off the platform and onto the pyramid. The idea was that water from the deep trench, once cleaned and purified, would flow into these columns. Then a giant float, possibly made of wood, would rise as the column filled with water. It would raise the stones to where they were needed for construction. Once the stone was in place, the water would be released, lowering the platform to prepare for the next stone. This advanced hydraulic system could have been a game-changer, making the entire construction process much faster and more efficient without needing so much labor. It almost seems like the ancient Egyptians had already adopted the idea of working smarter, not harder. However, not everyone agrees with this theory. Some experts argue that the area where the step pyramid of Zoser was built wouldn't have retained enough of the occasional rainfall to maintain such an advanced hydraulic system. The main theory suggests that there may have been a nearby lake that would fill up after a period of rain, and this lake could have provided water for the hydraulic system. However, there is no mention of such a lake in any of the ancient Egyptian writings, so it may be more of a guess than a fact. Then there's the issue of the hard labor itself. Remember when I said this method could have allowed ancient builders to lift stones with much less effort? Well, that might not be entirely true. According to some experts, building this hydraulic device alone would have required much more hard work than simply moving the stone blocks using traditional labor. And let's not forget, the step pyramid of Zoser is actually quite small compared to the later pyramids. The average weight of the stones used in the step pyramid was about 660 pounds, which is nothing compared to the blocks weighing over 2.5 tons used later in the Red Pyramid. Even if we completely dismiss this water-powered lifting theory, we still need to explain how this pyramid was built. To answer that, we need to go back a bit and talk about the original plans. Before Zoser's tomb was turned into a pyramid, the idea was to build a simple tomb. This type of tomb was very common in earlier periods, and it was a rectangular structure with a flat roof and slanted sides. But after finishing the original tomb, they decided to expand it a bit by adding more layers on top, then added more layers until the structure reached 6 distinct columns, each smaller than the one before it. And maybe they did all this by lifting those heavy stones using ramps, not a water-powered elevator. There's still so much we don't know about the step pyramid of Zoser. More research is desperately needed to understand how this system worked, or if it even existed. But the idea of using water in the construction of the pyramid adds a whole new dimension to our understanding of ancient Egyptian engineering. It's a strong reminder of how smart these builders were, and how they used the landscape and the power of water to create one of the most iconic monuments in history. Did you know that the Great Pyramids are one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and they're the only ones still standing today? Did you know that the pyramids of Giza weren't the only pyramids, and they weren't even the first ones? There were some very good pyramids, but they weren't as famous. No, I made that up. Back to the story in ancient Egypt, it was believed that the gods chose kings to serve on earth as their intermediaries in the afterlife. They were expected to become gods themselves. The pyramid complex was built to ensure the king had everything he would need in the afterlife. The complex included the pyramid, a palace and temples. The tomb in the pyramid where the king was buried was filled with many things he might need, such as furniture, food and gold vessels. In fact, the first pyramid was built 80 years before the first pyramid at Giza. There were about 100 of them, but some were never finished because construction took so long and not every pharaoh lived long enough to see the end of it. Now, let's talk about the construction itself. The largest of the Giza pyramids is about the height of a 40-story building. So how did they manage to build such a massive structure? About 5,000 years ago, long before the appearance of machines and other equipment, let's uncover the mystery. Pharaoh Khufu ascended to the throne around 2575 BC, and his architects began building the oldest and largest pyramids at Giza. It's estimated that more than 2 million limestone blocks were used to build the pyramid, each weighing about 2.5 tons, which is roughly the weight of a rhinoceros. The architect wanted the construction to be completed in 20 years, and to do so, they needed to lift and place one stone every 4 minutes, 24/7, 365 days a year, except leap years. So it was clear that a large number of workers were needed. Many people believe slaves worked on the pyramid site, but that's not true. Workers came from all over Egypt to contribute to the project. In total, about 25,000 Egyptians performed all kinds of work, from manual labor and craft work to administrative tasks. They worked around 10 hours a day, were provided with housing and good food, and lived more comfortably than the average Egyptian citizen at the time. It's believed that the workers lived in a nearby temporary city, and they were a very organized community with strong leadership. It seems the pyramids were designed to align with the cardinal points, and their sides symbolized sun rays. But at that time there were no compasses. The ancient Egyptians determined directions themselves, and with astonishing accuracy they aligned the pyramids using 2 constellations. The construction site was located on the west bank of the Nile, which also had symbolic meaning, just like the sunset in the west symbolizes the end of life. The second pyramid at Giza was dedicated to Khufu's son, Pharaoh Khafre. It's slightly smaller, but this pyramid houses the famous Sphinx without its nose. Of course, it originally had a nose. I'll tell you what happened to it, but it's still a mystery, and no one knows for sure. The Sphinx has a lion's body and a human head, and it was considered a guardian of important areas. This famous Sphinx, also known as the Abu al-Hol, has the head of a pharaoh, and it guards the pyramid facing the sunrise. The Sphinx is one of the largest and oldest statues in the world. Originally, it didn't just lack a nose, but it was also painted. Scientists have found traces of red paint on its face, so it's believed that the Sphinx was once painted red. There are also remains of yellow and blue colours on its body. The statue wasn't fully uncovered until around 1800. The Sphinx had been buried up to its shoulders until an adventurer and a team of 160 men dug it out. Let's get back to the construction phase. The workers, of course, needed stone blocks. There were 2 main sources from which people could obtain these stones. One source was near the construction site, but the yellow stone, embedded with fossils, was only suitable for the interior of the pyramid. The limestone blocks were dragged from a distance of 8 miles on 30-foot sledges, and it didn't seem too difficult to drag them. The sand mixed with just the right amount of water was very slippery, so 10 people could move the sled even with such a heavy rock. Surprisingly, cutting the limestone blocks wasn't the biggest challenge when the stone was still on the ground. It was soft and could be split relatively easily. But once exposed to the air, the limestone hardens, so the hardest part was shaping the blocks. This step was crucial because even the smallest mistake could cause the entire pyramid to collapse. Well, these limestone blocks were extracted and carried on sledges. Then they were shaped, but how were they placed into position? That's still a mystery. Archaeologists have discovered remnants of a ramp system dating back to the pyramid building period. Historians have come to a consensus that the Egyptians likely designed a unique ramp system to transport and pull massive stone blocks. The most common theory is that there were several ramps around the pyramid, and perhaps a central ramp with 2 stairways on each side, built over the pyramid stones. The ramp would have grown taller as the pyramid did. As the pyramid rose, people might have climbed the steps and pulled the stones on wooden sledges. But this is just one possibility. Other experts say the ramps were around the pyramid, while some believe they were inside. We may never know for sure, and it will remain a mystery forever. The outer limestone of the pyramid was polished with sand and stone. It even shone at the top, where there was a golden and silver capstone that sparkled over Egypt like a second sun. This is how it was 5,000 years ago. As for the interior, surprisingly, There's not much inside the pyramid. Most of it is just solid stone with very little open space. But let's take a quick look inside. From the entrance, there are two stairways. One descends, the other ascends, leading to the rooms. There are 3 of them inside. Why? That's apparently a mystery that has lasted throughout history. There always had to be a burial chamber prepared, just in case a pharaoh died before the construction was finished. So separate chambers were built one after the other as construction progressed. The last one to be built was the main chamber, called the King's Chamber, where King Khufu's resting place was located. It's the largest room at the heart of the pyramid, with a large passage leading to it. It's likely that this passage was used as an elevator to move granite to the top to build the pyramid. The interior granite was also used to create 5 layers of support beams to ensure the pyramid wouldn't collapse. And as we can see, it worked because the pyramid has stood for centuries. Unfortunately, none of these chambers have any hieroglyphs on the walls. If you want to see writings, you'll have to visit the decorated tombs near the pyramids. These works of art depict ancient Egyptian culture and daily life. The texts allow researchers to study their language and grammar. As for the treasures inside the pyramids, many tunnels and secret passages have been discovered, but even today no one knows the complete layout inside. Scientists have sent small robots with cameras inside for years, but there's still so much we don't know about the pyramids. Now they're trying to use X-rays to scan the pyramids from the outside without going inside. So yeah, the ancient Egyptians created a mystery that no one has been able to solve for 5,000 years. A chilling discovery was made in Egypt a few years ago. Want to hear about it? 16 human hands carefully buried in 4 strange pits. At first they didn't look like human hands because they were unusually large, but they were... The strange thing is there were only right hands, no left hands. It turns out this points to an ancient dark ritual, as ancient Egyptian art and stories talk about a celebration where warriors would present the right hands of their enemies as a sign of victory and demand gold in return. In exchange, the Egyptians believed in the afterlife, and cutting off someone's hand meant cutting off their power forever. This kind of defeat was very intriguing to the victorious side. The battle took place between the Egyptians and the Hyksos, who lived in what was once called Canaan. Egypt has always been the center of some historical discoveries, and a while back this papyrus was found. If we stretched it out, it would be a little taller than the world's smallest skyscraper, which is in Wichita Falls, Texas. When humans weren't writing on their note apps, they wrote on this thing made from papyrus plant fibers. About 2,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians wrote something that resembled a book, describing most of their traditions and views on the afterlife. This book is considered one of the most important texts of ancient Egypt and is still sold in bookstores today. This ancient manuscript was found in a chamber south of the Djoser Pyramid at Saqqara. Yes, the Djoser Pyramid is the oldest pyramid in Egypt, not the pyramids of Giza as most people think. Recently, Saqqara has been buzzing with archaeologists who may have found one of the oldest complete mummies in Egypt. They believe this beautifully preserved mummy belonged to a wealthy man. It was found in a deep well covered with layers of gold leaves. There are many symbols indicating he was an important and wealthy man, like the crown he wore on his head, the bracelet on his chest, and the fact that he was covered with a cloak reserved for Egypt's wealthy. The most exciting part of the whole discovery is that the resting place was sealed with mortar, just like the ancient Egyptians left it. After 4,300 years, it may seem odd, but in 2008, archaeologists discovered a lost pyramid, and now it's lost again because its condition deteriorated over 4,000 years, and today only its base is visible. It was a very important site in ancient times. They say that in the pyramid area, the ancients held a special kind of ceremony where high priests carried mummified remains of sacred bulls. Here's a fun fact. The ancient Egyptians believed the Apis bulls were earthly representations of the Memphis god, associated with fertility rites. It wasn't just any Apis bull. It had to be entirely black with a single white mark between its horns and a set of very specific characteristics. Local priests would choose and honor them until their death. After that, the bulls were mummified and buried in underground chambers. Meanwhile, this lost pyramid kind of disappeared around the 19th century. A German archaeologist was the first to discover it in the village of Saqqara. He named it the Headless Pyramid when he first found it, but after years of official discovery, desert sands covered the entire pyramid. There were some excavations between the 19th and 20th centuries. The 19th and 20th centuries weren't organized enough, which is why scientists were overjoyed when they dug up the complete base of a pyramid after removing a 25-foot-high pile of sand that had been covering it. It turns out that American archaeologists were digging up a tomb in Egypt that could contain over 1 million mummified bodies. So far, they've dug up about 1,700 mummies. One major difference from other classic Egyptian mummies is that these people weren't kings or pharaohs. They were regular folks who likely lived around 1,500 years ago when Egypt was under the control of the Roman and Byzantine empires. The name of the tomb is quite fascinating, though the name water buffalo is mentioned in case you want to visit it on your next trip. In addition to bulls and buffalo, the ancient Egyptians also loved baboons. Do you see a pattern here at the beginning? Archaeologists in the 20th century discovered a site full of mummified baboons in a place called the Valley of the Apes. It wouldn't have been possible to mummify an animal unless it was considered important. Some animals were more important than others because they were associated with specific gods. Jackals were linked to Anubis, the ancient god of the afterlife, and cats were associated with the goddess Bastet. The baboon was of great significance as it was believed to be linked to the god of wisdom and counsel, Ra, one of Egypt's greatest gods. The archaeologists who studied these animals weren't too happy, as they believed these baboons were kept inside and deprived of sunlight most of their lives. They suffered from a severe vitamin D deficiency and malnutrition. Perhaps Thoth, the god of wisdom, was angry at those who guarded these monkeys. Just a guess, because archaeologists in Egypt certainly don't have dull days. They also found human mummies with golden tongues from ancient times. Everything revolved around the afterlife, and they believed that golden tongues might help a person speak once they moved on to the next world. I mean, it's a long shot, but hey, why not? Some of these mummies were placed in wooden coffins, with things like necklaces, pottery, and golden artifacts shaped like lotus flowers and scarab beetles and iPhones. Yeah, I'm just kidding. A new temple was recently discovered in Egypt. Scientists believe it was dedicated to honoring Zeus Cassius. This god was a mix between Zeus, the great Greek god of the sky, and Mount Cassius. While digging in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, archaeologists uncovered 2 pink granite columns protruding from the ground. They believe these columns represent the front gate of the temple, which collapsed in an earthquake many years ago. Speaking of gods, it wasn't just the supreme gods that mattered. Scientists recently discovered a gold ring in a city south of Cairo. It wasn't magical, it was just a regular gold ring, but it carried the image of the goddess of joy, her official name being Bast. This god is often described in sacred texts as a cheerful dwarf. Today, many of the tattoos we draw lack any real meaning and are done for aesthetic purposes only. But in ancient Egypt, women would get tattoos as a symbol of protection during childbirth. That's what scientists believe, at least in the Nile region. Scientists found some mummies with well-preserved tattoos, which is rare because skin deteriorates easily. 2 of these women had tattoos on their lower backs, and the designs were simple. Most of the images featured the same cheerful dwarf we just talked about, Bast. She also had a side gig as a protector of women during childbirth. Do you believe me if I told you the ancient Egyptians invented robots? No? Well, that's because that's not exactly true. They were certainly astronomers, mathematicians and engineers, and in a way they did create a quirky invention. It was a mechanical deity statue some scientists called Hathor. This wooden statue had been on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for years before someone noticed its secret. With the help of an X-ray device, specialists discovered a mechanical operating system inside it. The pulley shaft runs from the statue's shoulder to its left leg. When the system rotates, the statue raises and lowers its hand. Wow, choose me! Pick me, I raised my hand here. Good news! Santa Claus is real, and this is what he looks like. I know it's not exactly how we imagine the jolly old man, but a recently discovered tomb might be the proof. We were waiting for proof that St. Nicholas was real. It turns out he wasn't from the North Pole, but rather a kind-hearted bishop from the 4th century, famous for giving gifts. Legend has it that he was a wealthy man born in the ancient city of Patara, modern-day Turkey, and he travelled to rural areas to help the poor and the sick for centuries, even though people weren't sure he actually existed. Some historical sources say he was buried in Myra, now called Demre, Turkey, since the 80s. Archaeologists dug around the area trying to prove this. And now, finally, the Christmas miracle has come true. After digging 6 feet deep in an annex of St. Nicholas Church, they discovered a mysterious limestone tomb about 2 meters long. While they are absolutely certain that this is St. Nicholas's final resting place, They are still searching for an inscription to confirm its exact age. The legend says that his house is located in Lapland, Finland. In 2018, archaeologists made an exciting discovery that might finally prove Santa Claus is real. They were digging at a site called Little Arrow when they accidentally found around 200 burial holes. But when they looked inside, they found no sign of Santa Claus. In fact, there were no human skeletons at all. Just a bunch of things like pottery and animal bones, so no one really knows what this place is. This was in stark contrast to a group of archaeologists working in the ancient city of Petra in Jordan since 2003. There were rumours about hidden rooms beneath the famous monument Al-Khazne, also known as the Treasury. After 21 years, the team finally decided to dig and discovered an intact tomb inside. They found at least 12 human skeletons and artifacts estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Hundreds of thousands of tourists visit Al-Khazne every year, and probably most of them go there to see the Holy Grail location in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Want to know the funny part? One of the skeletons in the tomb was holding a ceramic cup that closely resembled the Holy Grail. You might remember the devastating fire that caused severe damage to the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris in 2019. The building, originally constructed between the 12th and 13th centuries, had to be restructured, but archaeologists saw this as a golden opportunity to excavate the site and reveal its hidden secrets. The team was only allowed to dig about 16 inches under the floor, but that was enough. Once they removed the floor tiles and took off a thin layer of dirt, they discovered the top of a lead coffin, then found some limestone carvings, including full-size heads and torsos. They also discovered over 1,000 pieces of various artworks and ancient statues found in random places, including sewers, in July 2024. Bulgarian archaeologists were inspecting Roman sewage systems in the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica, when they found a marble statue about 7 feet tall of the Greek god Hermes. This city was completely destroyed and abandoned after 2 earthquakes, one in 388 and the other in 425. But for some reason, this statue was not destroyed. In fact, its head was found in remarkably good condition. Finding ancient artwork is certainly interesting, but imagine finding an entire hidden city in the Amazon rainforest using high-tech laser technology. Researchers discovered a lost civilization containing thousands of structures and a complete network of roads, channels and buried houses, all beneath dense forest. This city was built about 2,500 years ago in an area located at the foot of a volcano, which may have erupted and destroyed the civilization. At some point, it is hard to determine the exact population living there, but experts estimate they stayed for around 1,000 years. This discovery proves that ancient people also had large, organized cities in the heart of the Amazon. Something similar happened in Campeche, southern Mexico. An archaeologist was doing some online research when they accidentally discovered a hidden Mayan city. This area, now called Valeriana, was as large as Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. It contained pyramids, sports fields, amphitheatres and pathways connecting different areas. Thanks to satellite images, archaeologists discovered an entirely unknown Bronze Age civilization. They were examining aerial photos when they found 100 prehistoric settlements in the Pannonian Plain, a region that includes parts of what is now Serbia and Hungary, known today as the Tita Site Group. They seem to have been a well-organized society, skilled in food cultivation, hunting and fishing. A Google Earth program helped the team discover a mysterious group of 400 ancient gates in Saudi Arabia. These gates, scattered across the desert, are believed to be thousands of years old, made of stone and arranged in strange formations. These gates have puzzled archaeologists, as they don't seem to have been intended for funerals or as buildings where people lived, so we still don't know exactly what they are. Technology is making a real change in archaeology thanks to artificial intelligence and a $1 million prize. We finally managed to decode part of an ancient manuscript that was unreadable and severely damaged. The Herculaneum scrolls were discovered by workers digging in the ancient city of Herculaneum near Pompeii in 1752, but their condition was so poor that they were considered unreadable for years. Fortunately, advances in their study have helped reveal their secrets. Experts believe that one of these manuscripts was written by a philosopher who valued pleasures like music and food above all else. There's no doubt that Stonehenge in England is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. and some theories even suggest it was built by aliens. After more than a century of research, archaeologists are still trying to understand how it was built. Take that large altar in the middle, for instance. It turns out it came from Scotland. This is pretty strange, considering that this massive sandstone block weighs over 6 tons, and the people who built Stonehenge more than 4,000 years ago didn't have the luxury of wheels or modern tools. We can also find amazing things in the oceans. In 2013, a mysterious shipwreck was found about 20 feet underwater off the coast of Kenya. At the time, no one knew where it came from, but researchers are now pretty sure it could be from Vasco da Gama's fleet, the famous Portuguese navigator. He was the first to sail from Europe to India, around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, if confirmed. This shipwreck could be one of the oldest European wrecks in the Indian Ocean. Ancient treasures come in many forms, including bottles. Archaeologists in Norway recently discovered a 150-year-old message in a bottle while excavating a Viking burial mound. The bottle contained a letter written by Anders Lorentz, an archaeologist who worked at the site in the 19th century, along with his business card and some coins wrapped in paper. The letter gave some details about the excavation. It seems that Lorentz made a few mistakes, like the exact number of Viking shields. At the end of the letter he wrote a personal note in cursive, "Emma Gadd, my friend." So this not only gave us some historical insight, but also a glimpse into his personal life. Imagine being chosen to answer one of the biggest questions in history. What was the first civilization on Earth? The job description is simple, but the task is incredibly tough. You need to discover the evidence of the world's first official civilization. Was it the Sumerians in ancient Mesopotamia, or the ancient Egyptians along the Nile River? I don't want to stress you out, but history is literally in your hands. Good luck. Since you can't travel back in time to visit ancient Mesopotamia to get answers to your questions, you'll need to search museum databases for clues. First, we need to define civilization. It's not just a bunch of people living together in harmony. There are some key elements that make a group of people a civilization, like urban planning, building cities, irrigation systems, and writing. Start your research by diving into the history of the Sumerians, who are considered the world's first civilization today. Imagine being the first of your kind. That means there are no outside examples to follow, and you're starting from scratch. The first thing you'll need is land. Since there were no water companies active in the world at that time, you'll need a piece of land that's easy to access. So, the Sumerians settled between two major rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates in southern Mesopotamia, around 5000 BC. Fun fact, Mesopotamia. The word Mesopotamia translates to land between two rivers on the modern map, which is pretty much the location of Iraq today. Along with the land you need for civilization to get food, the Sumerian civilization faced a hot and dry climate, but they managed to thrive in agriculture in the area by channeling river water and building reservoirs and dams. The Sumerians allowed a series of settlements to appear across the plains of Mesopotamia. The famous city of Babylon was one of them. You know, the city that's supposed to have those hanging gardens, I say supposed to, because there's no concrete evidence that this monument really existed. It's considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and was mentioned as a major engineering achievement in a book published around 290 BC. Though there's no record of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Sumerians were known for their building skills, as their cities were filled with mud brick buildings, the most impressive of which were called ziggurats, stepped pyramids built for spiritual purposes. The Sumerians built a trade network to make up for a lack of resources and began trading goods with neighboring rising civilizations like Anatolia and Egypt. The beginning of trade was what pushed the Sumerians to develop what is believed to be the world's first writing system. It started as a simple system, likely dating back to 3400 BC. In this system, each syllable was represented by a drawing, and it gradually evolved into a connected, integrated writing system. Don't just take my word for it. Take a look at this piece from the Babylonian era. This large basalt tablet is called Hammurabi. It's known that the two-dimensional code is the first set of written laws for humanity, according to historical accounts. It was carved into volcanic rock around 1760 BC. Just look at the precision of these carvings. It's truly amazing. But the content is also surprising, as these 282 rules range from commercial regulations to strict justice laws. The problem is that historians don't agree on whether the Sumerians were the first to invent writing, with some believing it might have been the ancient Egyptians. Let's pause here. It's believed that ancient Egyptian settlements began around 5500 BC, which is before the Sumerian civilization. But remember, I mentioned that civilizations needed certain things. Before Egypt was considered a civilization, it consisted of several smaller city-states like Memphis, Abydos, and scattered towns along the Nile. Egypt wasn't unified under Sumerian rule until 3000 BC. It remained a single kingdom and empire until nearly 1000 BC. While there's no consensus, some Egyptologists believe that Sumerian immigrants were the ones who founded early Egyptian settlements. The evidence might lie in the cylinder seals made of hard stone, which were commonly used in Sumer, as these seals ensured the legitimacy of legal transactions. However, it's hard to say whether this method was introduced by Sumerian immigrants or simply through trade, as the time period isn't something we can use to determine who came first. We'll need to look at something else. But what about the Samaritans? The Egyptians were also extremely skilled builders. They built the famous pyramids of Giza and many other pyramids across their land to improve their construction techniques. They also immersed themselves in developing a deeper understanding of mathematics. They developed a new form of measurement called the cubit, which is equivalent to the length of the forearm. The Great Pyramid, for instance, is 440 cubits by 440 cubits. They were also innovative astronomers, combining their mathematical skills with precise astronomical observations. They were the first civilization to divide the day into 24 hours, and they even created a solar calendar, which is the first dating system in history that included 365 days in the year. Well, there's no denying how impressive their achievements were, but some experts say the debate should be settled by comparing their writing systems. Hieroglyphic writing. It's said that the first Egyptian writing system dates back to 3000 BC, and it consisted of over 700 symbols carved into stone for a long period. Scholars once thought Sumerian writing preceded Egyptian writing. But in a recent discovery by researchers from Yale University, archaeologists claimed the opposite, as they found a tablet with 4 symbols that are believed to have been written around 3250 BC. They also found another rock painting depicting a pregnant elephant, dated to 4000 BC. Now, there's a third possibility, which is that very few people mention the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Ancient India, located around present-day Pakistan and India. The Indus Valley Civilization is also considered one of the oldest civilizations, given the uncertain origins of the Hindus. The group of texts, known as the Upanishads, the Indus Valley Civilization thrived around 3000 BC, but records show that the people of the Indus Valley were trading with Mesopotamia as early as 3500 BC. Wait a minute, how's that possible? No, they weren't time travelers. This isn't a sci-fi movie. There were actually agricultural settlements in the region, which slowly grew into larger cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Ancient Indian cities were highly advanced, filled with houses made of baked brick built in a grid system. These ancient cities even had drainage and sewage systems connecting most of the houses, using gravity to carry waste. Outside the city, they were very advanced, and they were also a highly religious civilization, with Hindu beliefs at the center of their practices, although their cities weren't filled with spiritual buildings. In fact, the most important building in Mohenjo-Daro was a public bath. Interesting, isn't it? Now, why can't we know if they were the oldest civilization on Earth? Even though some historians suspect the origins of the people of the Indus Valley go back to 5000 BC, there's no solid evidence of that. Just speculation, and the best evidence we have is the Upanishads. The Upanishads are texts filled with philosophy, chants and rituals. This is part of Hindu practices. The practices involved memorizing and passing on the wisdom of the Upanishads orally, so it took some time before they appeared as written texts. Well, I'd say historians aren't really sure what the first civilization in the world was. We can only guess at this point, but who knows what new discoveries might reveal. It's a mystery. It's hot. And it's hard to breathe deep in the earth in the Khoi mine in the heart of Botswana. A few hours into your shift and the next stone in your hands doesn't seem promising. On the other hand, there's a slim chance it could be the biggest diamond you've ever found. You decide to inform your Canadian manager at Lucara Diamond Company, and you're successful. It turns out that the stone you found is a stunning 492-carat diamond, the second largest ever discovered. The average engagement ring size now is 1.7 carats, meaning this diamond alone could make rings for over 1,465 brides. You can compare the size of this stone to a fist, And the weight of this priceless giant is more than a pound. Its value hasn't been determined yet, but what if we take a guess? Another diamond from the same mine, named the Constellation, sold for $63 million in 2016, weighing just 813 carats, which is a third of the size of this new diamond. The only other larger diamond discovered is the famous Cullinan diamond found in South Africa in 1905, weighing 3,106 carats. Now, calculate how many engagement rings could be made from it and write the number in the comments. Unfortunately, it was later cut into several smaller pieces, some of which are now part of the British Crown jewels. Interestingly, there was an even larger diamond, a black diamond called Carbonado, found on the surface in Brazil in the late 19th century. The most fascinating part is that it might be from a meteor. The Sergio Carbonado stone, as it was named, was broken into smaller pieces, and they wanted to use it for industrial drill bits because it is one of the hardest materials on Earth. This new diamond was discovered with the help of advanced technology, using a system called mega diamond recovery, X-ray transmission, to detect the stone. This isn't the first record-breaking diamond Lucara has found at the Korove mine. They discovered another one in 2019. The Siwelo diamond, weighing 1,758 carats at the time, was the second largest diamond in the world. Louis Vuitton, the luxury brand, later bought it for an undisclosed amount. Before that, in 2015, the Letseng diamond was found at the same mine, weighing 1.19 carats, and earned the company a profit of $53 million. In 2017, diamonds weren't the only amazing thing you could find in the ground. The deeper and better you dig, the higher the chances of discovering rare items, like an ancient lipstick, for example. This might be the world's oldest lipstick, about 5,000 years old. The dark red lipstick was found in a stone jar in southern Iran. The jar actually appeared in 2001, but researchers took a long time to figure out what it really was, because it wasn't like modern lipstick in a tube. People probably used it with a brush. Researchers are excited because this discovery could give us a glimpse into what women were like. Perhaps the Bronze Age was when those from elite societies used this lipstick to appear shiny and show off their high status. Now here's the story of the jar. It came from a tomb dating back to the 3rd millennium BC, associated with the powerful Maratsi civilization. It was of great significance in that part of Mesopotamia when the tomb was discovered after floods, and sadly, thieves took many of the items. However, the authorities were able to recover this particular piece. The jar caught scientists' attention because it was different from other pieces they had found. They usually find compressed grey materials in similar containers, but when they opened this one, loose, fine powder spilled out. It was a dark, purple-grey colour, unlike anything they had seen before. When researchers analysed the powder, they discovered it was made of hematite, giving it a rich, dark red colour. It also contained other ingredients like plant oils and wax, making it very similar to what you would expect in modern lipstick. Apparently, back in the Bronze Age, makeup was a symbol of luxury and high social status in that area, showing wealth and power, especially among the elite. By the way, researchers don't want to say that this is the oldest lipstick in the world. Who knows, something older might show up. One day, how about moving to Bulgaria now and doing some excavation there? Wait, no need to grab a shovel and get your hands dirty. There's an amazing discovery waiting for you there. They found a large marble statue about 7 feet tall, probably depicting Hermes, the Greek god. But what's even stranger is that it was buried in ancient sewers for about 2,000 years. The statue is in very good condition, especially the well-preserved head. There are some cracks in the hands, but overall it's in surprisingly excellent condition, according to the excavation's scientific director. Here's how they found the statue. The team was conducting routine digs in southwestern Bulgaria near the Greek border. This area was part of the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica, dating back to a few hours after your shift started, and with another stone in your hand that didn't seem promising, there was still a slim chance it could be the biggest diamond you've ever found. You decided to inform your Canadian manager at Lucara Diamond Company, and you were successful. It turned out the stone you found was a stunning diamond weighing 2,492 carats, making it the second largest diamond ever discovered. The average size for an engagement ring today is 1.7 carats, which means this diamond alone could be used to make rings for over 1,465 brides. You can compare the size of the previous stone to the size of a fist, and this priceless giant weighs more than a pound. Its value hasn't been determined yet, but what if we take a guess? Another diamond from the same mine called the Constellation was sold for $63 million in 2016, and it weighed only 813 carats, a third of the size of this new diamond. The only other larger diamond ever discovered is the famous Cullinan diamond. It was found in South Africa in 1905 and weighed 3,106 carats. Now, calculate how many engagement rings could be made from it and write the number in the comments. Unfortunately, it was later cut into several smaller diamond pieces, with some of these pieces now part of the British crown jewels. Interestingly, there was an even larger diamond, a black diamond called Carbonado, which was found above ground in Brazil in the late 19th century. The most amazing part is that it might be from a meteor. The Sergio Carbonado stone, as it's called, was broken into smaller pieces, and they wanted to use it in drill bits because it's one of the hardest materials on Earth. This new diamond was discovered with the help of advanced technology, using a system called mega diamond recovery, X-ray transmission, to reveal the stone. This isn't the first record-breaking diamond Lucara has found in the Karowe mine, as they discovered it back in 2019. The Sewelô diamond, which weighed 1,758 carats at the time, was the second largest diamond in the world. It was later purchased by the luxury brand Louis Vuitton for an undisclosed amount. Before that, in 2015, the Letseng lunar diamond was found in the same mine, weighing 1.19 carats and brought the company a profit of $53 million. In 2017, diamonds weren't the only amazing things you could find underground. The deeper and better you dug, the more likely you were to discover rare things, like an ancient lipstick, for example, possibly the oldest lipstick in the world, which is around 5,000 years old. Dark red lipstick was found in a stone vial in southern Iran. The vial actually appeared in 2001, but researchers took a long time to figure out what it really was because it didn't look like modern lipstick in a tube. People probably used it with a brush. Researchers are excited because this discovery could give us a glimpse of what women were like. Maybe it was the Bronze Age, and people from elite societies used this lipstick to appear glossy and show off their high status. Now here's the story of the vial. It came from a tomb dating back to the 3rd millennium BC and was associated with the powerful Maratsi civilization. It was significant in that part of Mesopotamia when the tomb was discovered after the floods, but unfortunately, thieves took many of the pieces. Luckily, authorities managed to recover this particular piece. The vial caught the attention of scientists because it was different from the other items they had found. They usually find compressed grey materials in similar containers, but when they opened this container, a soft, loose powder spilled out. It was dark grey-purple in colour, unlike anything they had seen before. When researchers analysed the powder, they discovered it was made of hematite, which gave it a rich dark red colour. It also contained other ingredients like vegetable oils and wax, making it very similar to what you'd expect in modern lipstick. It appears to date back to the Bronze Age, when makeup was a sign of luxury and high social status in that region. It showed wealth and power, especially among the elite. By the way, researchers don't want to claim this is the oldest lipstick in the world. Who knows, something older might be found someday. What do you think about moving to Bulgaria now and doing some excavation there? Wait, there's no need to grab a shovel and dirty your hands. An amazing discovery is waiting for you there. They found a large marble statue, about 7 feet tall, possibly depicting Hermes, the Greek god, but the most interesting part is that it was buried in ancient drains for about 2,000 years. The statue is in very good condition, especially the well-preserved head. There are some cracks in the hands, but overall it's in surprisingly excellent shape, according to the scientific director of the excavation. And here's how they found the statue. The team was conducting routine excavations in southwest Bulgaria near the Greek border. This area was once part of the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica, which dates back to the 4th century BC. During the dig, the researchers found the statue's base, and from there they carefully revealed the rest of the statue. It was a huge surprise for them, as they didn't expect to find something like this. The team is currently working on safely removing the statue from the drains. It's really heavy, so they're using a crane to lift and move it to the Petrige History Museum after it's restored and preserved. The plan is to display it. Experts are super excited about this discovery because it could teach us more about the local culture of Heraclea Sintica, a previously unknown archaeological site. If you dream of making discoveries like this but don't have a college degree, don't despair. Even amateurs can make scientific breakthroughs. For example, you might find a Roman double-faced figurine, a strange and mysterious 12-sided metal object about the size of a grapefruit, and no one really knows what it was used for. It had been known for centuries. This 12-sided object was discovered last summer in a farmer's field near Norton Disney, about 35 miles southeast of Sheffield. A group of volunteers had already found Roman coins and gemstones in the area, so they knew the field might contain more treasures. A geological survey showed underground areas where the Earth's magnetic field was disturbed, suggesting that something hidden might be there. The team began digging trenches. During a 2-week excavation, on the second to last day in Trench 4, one of the members spotted the 12-sided object. Richard Parker, the group's secretary, was nearby making tea when he heard a shout. He said they were all shocked because they hadn't found much metal before. Then suddenly, this amazing artifact appeared. What's interesting about this 12-sided object is that it was complete, which is rare. Many other objects found previously were broken or incomplete. Also, it's larger than usual. Roman 12-sided objects can be small, about the size of a golf ball, but this one is closer to the size of a grapefruit. The object is now displayed in a local museum. So far, over 100 Roman double-faced figurines have been found in northwestern Europe, most of them in former Roman territories like Roman gallows areas, dating from the 1st to the 3rd century AD. Each figurine is a hollow metal shell, usually made of bronze, with 12 faces and openings of different sizes. Around each face, there are concentric rings imprinted on the metal, and at each corner where the faces meet, there's a small stud. There's no writing on them, and nothing in Roman texts mentions them at all. For this reason, no one really knows what these double-faced figurines were. There are many theories suggesting they were toys, dice, mace heads, or even distance-measuring tools used in Roman artillery. Some think they were used to stitch gloves, or even calculate dates using the stars. But most of these ideas are unfounded. Wait until the mystery remains. To the 4th century BC, during the excavation, researchers found the base of a marble statue. From there, they carefully uncovered the rest of the statue, which was a huge surprise to them as they didn't expect to find anything like that. The team is currently working on safely removing the statue from the sewer system. It's incredibly heavy, so they're using a crane to lift it and transport it to the Petriged History Museum after restoration and preservation. The plan is to display it. The experts are very excited about this discovery, as it could teach us more about the local culture in Heraclea Sintica, an unknown archaeological site. If you're dreaming of discoveries like these but don't have a college degree, don't lose hope. Even amateurs can make scientific breakthroughs. For example, you might find a 2-faced Roman figurine, a strange, mysterious metallic object with 12 faces, about the size of a grapefruit, and no one really knows what it's for. Historians have been digging in. This 12-faced figurine has been known for centuries. It was discovered last summer in a farmer's field near Norton Disney, about 35 miles southeast of Sheffield. A group of volunteers had already found Roman coins and gemstones in the area, so they knew the field might contain more treasures. A geological survey showed underground areas where the magnetic field of the Earth was disturbed, suggesting that something hidden might be there. The team started digging trenches. During a 2-week excavation, on the second to last day, in Trench 4, one of them spotted the 12-faced figurine. Richard Parker, the group's secretary, was nearby making tea when he heard a shout. He said they were all shocked because they hadn't found much metal. Then, suddenly, that amazing artifact appeared. What's interesting about this 12-faced figurine is that it was complete, which is rare. Many other figurines that were found before were broken or incomplete. Also, it's bigger than usual. Roman 12-faced figurines are usually small, about the size of a golf ball, but this one is closer to the size of a grapefruit. The double-faced figurine is now displayed in a local museum. So far, more than 100 Roman double-faced figurines have been found in northwestern Europe, mostly in former Roman territories, such as areas of Roman gallows, dating back to between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD. Each figurine is a hollow metal shell, usually made of bronze, with 12 faces and openings of varying sizes. Around each face there are concentric rings pressed into the metal, and at each corner where the faces meet, there's a small nail. There's no writing on them, and nothing in Roman texts mentions them at all. That's why no one knows what these double-faced figurines were for. There are many theories, such as they were toys, dice, mace heads, or even tools for measuring distances in Roman artillery. Some believe they were used for knitting gloves or even calculating dates using the stars, but most of these ideas are unfounded. Wait until the mystery remains. Miles and miles of yellow sand, treeless mountain ranges, and a scorching sun overhead, and suddenly something you never expected in a barren desert. A small, enthusiastic group of people. They're as happy as if they had won the lottery. They just discovered an ancient tomb that had been submerged by water, with its walls in poor condition, but the things they found inside proved that this is the burial site of one of Egypt's most mysterious pharaohs. Historians had been searching for his tomb for years, but no one expected it to hide ancient treasures. After a careful inspection of the site, Egyptian officials announced the discovery of the tomb of King Thutmose II. It's the last missing tomb from the 18th dynasty in Egypt, and also the first royal tomb found since the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. More than 100 years ago, a team of Egyptians and British archaeologists discovered the tomb in the Theban Mountains, west of Luxor, near the famous Valley of the Kings. Before that, the site was only known as Tomb C4. But during the excavation, the team found clear evidence proving that it belonged to King Thutmose II. In fact, archaeologists found the entrance and main tunnel leading to the tomb in 2022. But initially they thought it belonged to a queen due to its proximity to the tombs of Thutmose III's wives. It's also close to the tomb of Queen Hatshepsut. Originally, it was prepared for her when she was just a royal wife, but everything changed when she became a pharaoh. We'll talk about this fate transformation later. But they soon realized that their discovery was much more significant. They found alabaster jars bearing the name of Thutmose II and the words of the deceased king written on them. That's when they realized that the tomb was indeed his final resting place. Unfortunately, Thutmose II had witnessed better days, according to the head of Egypt's Antiquities Department and the leader of the Egyptian excavation team. The tomb had suffered severe damage due to ancient floods that inundated the burial chamber shortly after the pharaoh's death, likely leading to its destruction. The mummy of Thutmose II was buried in the Valley of the Kings and is now displayed at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, alongside other ancient Egyptian rulers. This discovery gives visitors a rare opportunity to see the remains of a nearly forgotten pharaoh. Experts now consider the discovery of his tomb to be one of the most significant finds in recent years. The artifacts found there provide important details that help us better understand the history of the region and the reign of Thutmose II. Although the tomb's design is relatively simple and follows the same architectural style preferred by later Egyptian rulers, its historical significance cannot be denied. In any case, the job isn't finished yet. Archaeologists are now focused on solving another mystery, where the rest of the tomb's contents ended up. The team is determined to continue their search.